Kitty hopes you enjoy the video. Lawyers of Reddit, what was your hold it moment where you knew you would win? I had a client who was accused of taking a young woman's car and then crashing it / fleeing the scene. The girl testified at trial that she had given him the keys that night because she was drunk and would never ever drink and drive. Apparently she was not aware that I had requested and obtained a copy of her driving record which showed she received a DUI a month after the incident. I still remember the look on her face when I handed her driving record to her and said, except for that one time you got caught a month later, right? The look on the judge's face was equally memorable. I trapped a defendant pretty badly one time. He testified in a depot he had a green arrow for his left turn and that my client ran the red. Unfortunately for him, the additional turn lane arrow was installed 2 months after the wreck. Case settled for policy limits a week later. I'm not a lawyer, but I took my old landlord to court when I was in college. They stole my security deposit over bullshit. They claimed I trashed the place, not knowing that I took pictures and video when I moved in and out. Their evidence was a VHS quality recording of going through a perfectly clean apartment in better condition than it was when I moved in, but then they opened up the top of the stove and found a single piece of elbow macaroni under it, holding it up triumphantly. That was the crux of their defense. The judge was not amused, and I got all my money back plus my lawyer fees and the filing fee. She then fought against her own lawyer to avoid paying him a whole. It wasn't a trial, but during a deposition on a case where 2 former employees decided to start their own company in a very niche market, but decided to make their plans on company laptops they unsuccessfully tried to brick. One of the defendants was the one being deposed. She said she answered to a higher power than the company. When pressed on what that meant, she said herself. That got reused prominently at trial. It's a powerful answer, to be fair. Sadly not powerful enough though. I was reviewing the transcript of an interview with a child. The child made incriminating statements against my client. At one point, when discussing the allegations, the child used an odd word, but I didn't think much of it. A few days later, I was watching a video of the child interacting with their grandmother, who hates my client, from about a week before that interview. The grandmother used the exact same odd word in the exact context the child later used it. At that moment, it became clear that child had been coached. It was the first real aha moment of my career. I worked on a case involving defective processors. In discovery we got emails from the defendant's engineers that had worked on the processors. They were in a nation country, but the emails were in English because they were going to US executives. One of the more senior engineers basically laid out the exact defect we were suing over, explaining what the problem was and why it was their fault, and finishing with "this is big problem, we ship crap to customer." Needless to say we hit them over the head with that in mediation, and they settled shortly after. My client has been keeping her son away from the father because the father has a new child. She is concerned that her son will act violently towards the new child and she could be held liable. Judge, that's not even a defense. A lawyer, but I played one in small claims court. My lease had an exit clause that said, if I fronted 2 months rent, they would work to lease my place and return anything unused. I checked with the office ahead of time. They ensured me there was a waiting list, so I gave them the 2 months and moved. They never returned a dime. I talked to the new tenant and confirmed they moved in a week later. In court, the judge was commenting on how he didn't see anything explicitly saying they would return any unused rent, even though that intent was stated to me a few times. Dumbo from the leasing office piped in with, "Your Honor, in almost every case we can return some money, but in this case we didn't have a tenant in the 2 months after he left." So she gave the case back to me, and I presented the affidavit from the new tenant confirming the move-in date. Judge awarded me double what they owed. Turns out leasing office Dumbus 1 and 2 thought they could lie to me and return my excess rent money to themselves. It was my 3rd month of practice. I was in family law at the time, representing mom in a petition for a restraining order against boyfriend/dad. At issue in the broader case was child visitation, custody, support, etc., but today's hearing was just on the RO. We had pretty good facts, but it was mostly based on testimony of the parties. My client was way more reputable as a witness, so I was feeling confident. 10 minutes before the hearing, my client shows up. I give her a last minute prep on what to expect, and then she says I'm glad I'm going through with this. I can't deal with it anymore, and he's just getting worse. To top it off, he left me a drunken, ranting voicemail on Saturday. You have your phone with you? Yes. We play the voicemail, and it's a full 2 minutes of ex-boyfriend screaming shut, like I should have ducking killed you when we were together. You were always such a bitch. I hope you burn to death in a fire. I didn't have time to ask her why the duck she hadn't said anything to me about the voicemail before the bailiff called our case. We sit. The judge asks if either side has additional evidence, and I ask for permission to play the voicemail. Ex-boyfriend, who didn't have an attorney, didn't object, so I played the whole nasty 2-minute rant in open court. Judge goes, we're going to take a brief recess before I issue my ruling. If the parties want to meet and confer in the hall, they are welcome to. Boyfriend knew he was ducked. We settled the whole damn case then and there. My client got a wish list in terms of custody, supervised visitation, child support, plus the restraining order, to boot. My client was accused of brutally murdering a dog. Cop testified that there was no testing of the blood, no body ever found, and admitted it could have, in fact, run away. The eyewitness said she could see the killing down the hallway from the dining room. Cop testified there was no hallway and the dining room was on a different level of the house than the killing supposedly took place. Then the person who was leading the lynch mob against my client around town for the last year testified that she had been in the apartment between the two visits by the cop to evaluate the scene. No body, a compromised crime scene, witness who couldn't see anything, and admission that there was no proof the dog was dead. Closing argument lasted 3 seconds. Your Honor, I'm asking for an acquittal. When I compared the scanned copy of the deed provided by the other side's lawyers to the original my client eventually got around to providing. The scanned copy provided by the other side had a witness signature. The original did not. My mom hit a guy on a bike with her car in a parking lot. She claimed he hit her. She also wanted to countersue the cyclist for scaring her. In her deposition she started every sentence with, "When I hit him." I'm not a lawyer, but a friend of mine was a attorney in New York for a while. He was defending a guy who was asleep in the backseat of his car while intoxicated, and an ICE trooper arrested him. On the stand, the trooper testified that he visually saw the key in the ignition. My friend gave him like 3 chances to walk it back. Are you sure, trooper, that you actually saw the key in the ignition? Yes, counselor. When a cop calls a lawyer counselor he really means a hole. And then my buddy dropped the hammer. You are aware that my client drives a Toyota Prius? Bam. Not a lawyer, but we had no evidence that the woman who slammed into my stopped car going 85 miles per hour was drunk until she indignantly admitted it on tape in her deposition. She busted into my deposition and demanded she go first because I was a lying bitch. She excitedly told my lawyer that the police report was wrong because it said she was coming from the movie theater when she was actually coming from her friend's bar. Did you have anything to drink at your friend's bar? Of course. How many drinks? I dunno. They just keep my glass full. Did you take any medicine that day? Methadone and low blood pressure medicine. I see. The cops had refused to breathalyze her at the scene because her husband was a firefighter that they knew personally. They told her to go home, sober up, and go to the hospital later. I heard the whole thing, but had no proof until she handed it to me. They settled same day. This document doesn't state our company's name, so we are not involved in the settlement. Me, line 4 specifically lists the company as the defendant, and then the company is referenced to in lines 13, 27, and 33. I swear, if you read the documents, you're a better lawyer than 90% of the ones out there. I clerk for a judge, and we had a low-level thief in our courtroom who had robbed one of his neighbor's houses in the winter in Colorado, and all the police had to do was follow the footsteps back to his house, where he was hanging out with the stolen items and a small amount of drugs and a shitty handgun. Idiot. Obligatory, not mine but my mom's story. She was fighting for custody on behalf of the father, trying to prove that the kids were living in subpar conditions with their drug addict mother in spite of the ample child support provided. It was a tough case because courts are so hesitant to pull kids away from their moms. Then the mom burst out that she had been feeding the kids cat food as proof that she wouldn't let them starve. Needless to say, the judge didn't take that as a good reason for the kids to stay with their mom. Not a lawyer, but I'm currently in a custody battle. Mother is saying I can't be trusted because I've been refusing to take our child to the therapist. The therapist testified I couldn't bring our child in because therapy must have both parents' consent, and mother has retracted consent.